Joining us now to discuss this is board-certified pediatrician Dr. Joel Warsh, commonly known as Dr. Gator. He holds a master's in epidemiology and is author of the book Between a Shot and a Hard Place. So, Dr. Gator, thank you for joining us. Can I just get your first thoughts on this, your reaction to the changing guidelines surrounding hepatitis B vaccines for babies?
I think they made the right decision. I know it's controversial and I know not everybody agrees, but there are many countries around the world that go with a more risk-based approach. And the risk, while not zero, is really, really small for a baby who is born to a mother that doesn't have hepatitis B. And so it's about a 1 in 7 million risk. And I think it's reasonable that we would go to a more risk-based approach and not necessarily give every single baby a hepatitis B vaccine at birth.
So what are the factors being weighed here? Are there risks to taking the vaccine so early? I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but what are they weighing to make this decision?
There's a risk with any medication or any vaccine that you take. I mean, there's always a risk that you could have an allergic reaction, that you can have a fever, that you can have encephalitis or encephalopathy, so brain inflammation. So those are always possible. The risk is small, but not zero. But at the same time, the risk of catching hepatitis B if mom doesn't have it is also extremely small in a baby, especially if you're going to choose to do it at that 2-month mark. Then really the only risk there would be if the test is wrong or somebody happens to come and bleed on your baby, which of course is a really, really small risk. So it's not zero, but it's just small. And so the question is really weighing that small risk of getting hepatitis B versus the risk of giving 3 million children or so a year the hepatitis B vaccine that don't really need it.
So those who voted for this change said safety and effectiveness data for the current recommendation is inadequate. It was noted that they had no control groups at all during the testing. Are you surprised to hear this at all?
I'm not surprised. I was surprised when I started really researching and digging into vaccines back several years ago. But now, the reality is that a lot of the research is short-term, done by the companies, and especially with hepatitis B, the safety data is quite limited before the vaccines came out. There certainly have been some safety research done after that, but it's not completely adequate. And certainly for all vaccines, we really have very limited long-term data. And so I think that's really important. And when you have a vaccine that you're talking about giving to a newborn baby on day 1 of life, you really want to have very large benefits. And I think the benefits are very minimal for hepatitis B. The benefits would only be for a very few babies, like maybe 50 to 100 a year, that might come in contact with hepatitis B, not from a mom that doesn't have hepatitis B. So I think ultimately it makes sense, and the risks are quite small to most babies, and there certainly could be some risks from the vaccine.
So besides the hepatitis B vaccine, overall, would you say whether have we been over-vaccinating babies?
I think that's a tough question to say. I mean, I think there's something good to be said about giving vaccines and protecting against diseases, but there's certainly also a question about, are we doing too many vaccines? How many is too many? And I think those are important questions to ask and things that ACIP is going to explore over the next few years, because those aren't really questions that we've been able to discuss or explore, like how many is too many? Is it too much? What's the cumulative risk from a vaccine? And I think that answer is different for each child, but ultimately it should be a question that we're allowed to ask and should be something that we can study, so that way we can go with a more risk-based approach and maybe tailor it or be more individualized to each child, and not just give more and more vaccines, but potentially to weigh out those risks versus benefits and to prioritize the ones that are more important.
Can I just ask you, Dr. Gator, what are the cumulative risks, if any at all?
I think we're still not sure, right? I think that we haven't really studied the vaccine schedule as a cumulative schedule, and we haven't studied it long term, so it's very hard to say. We know that in terms of short-term risk, you can certainly get fever, seizures, encephalitis, encephalopathy, some autoimmune conditions. But I think the big question really remains, and this is what's debated, is we're seeing a chronic disease epidemic in our kids, and some individuals are concerned that maybe vaccines play into that in some way. Maybe it increases the risk of asthma, allergies, autoimmune conditions, autism. I mean, these are the questions that come up over and over again in parents' mind and practitioners' mind. And I think that is the thing that we need to study more to be able to understand if it's related, and if so, how.
In your mind, are we likely to see a revision of other vaccines as well for infants, or perhaps a move toward a more tailored approach? to vaccination based on individual need? How do you foresee this happening, playing out?
I think we'll continue to see changes, and I think that's what we should be seeing. I mean, we should always be adjusting, we should always be improving, we should always be discussing, and we want the safest, most effective schedule, and we want the best for our kids. And so ultimately, we need to debate and discuss that and always be open to making changes, because again, more isn't always better, and there may also be new vaccines that come on the market that are to be added or to be considered to be added to the vaccine schedule, and so we'll have to discuss that as they come up. Like recently, we had the RSV vaccine immunization that was added to the schedule, so there's always new recommendations, and they're going to have to discuss those as they come up. But yeah, I do think we need to go back. We need to look at the safety data. We need to get new information, new safety data, and answer the questions that parents have and practitioners have, so that way we can offer the most benefit with the least amount of risk.
Okay, Dr. Gator, just one final question here. Can I hear your comments on how you view this administration's approach to vaccines versus previous administrations?
I think there is a stronger push towards looking through everything and asking the more difficult questions. In the past, we have really seen kind of a blanket approach to vaccines, which vaccines are good and they're safe and effective, and there hasn't been a lot of scrutiny around, especially the safety concerns that some individuals have expressed, and especially when we're talking about cumulative doses and the long-term risks. I think that that's something that's been marginalized and often not discussed, and we only focus on the benefit of the protection of vaccines, but not necessarily the risk versus benefit calculation. And I've seen a much more stringent approach and much more discussion around vaccine risks lately. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see. So the balance is kind of shifted in the other direction. And I think somewhere in the middle is going to be where we hopefully end up.
Okay, well, Dr. Gator, it's always great to speak with you. Great insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.